Hello, I'm Matt and I'd like to welcome you to the channel. Today's video is going to be over Chapter 4 in my book, Deciding for Life, How I Lost 70 Pounds Without Working Out and While Still Eating Foods That I Love. Chapter 4 is titled, My Plan. Focus on what prior success felt like. But before I get started, I'm going to throw this backpack with 70 pounds of lead on so I can remind myself of how much more awesome I feel when I'm not 70 pounds overweight, and I'm going to go for a mile walk and talk about Chapter 4 with you. So let me throw the backpack on and we'll get going. Okay, here we go. Before I get started, I have to give a quick disclaimer. I am not a medical professional, and I give no medical advice. My goal with this channel, and with my book, Deciding for Life, How I Lost 70 Pounds Without Working Out and While Still Eating Foods That I Love, is to inspire others, like you, if you're substantially overweight, to find a healthy way to get your weight to a healthy level. Because until you do so, and until you've done it at least once, you really don't know how awesome you're going to feel. I've lost 70 pounds once and 80 pounds once, so I truly know the difference in how I feel when I'm not so heavy. So now on to Chapter 4. When you lose 70 pounds, you feel like a totally different person. You feel like a new person. And truly, you can't understand how great that feels until you do it. And I didn't really realize it until after the second time I really lost my weight, after the second time of losing 70 pounds. And, you know, it's because you lose the weight so slowly, it's really hard to recognize the differences in your life. But once you have lost it and you truly feel the difference, it is an amazing feeling and you feel so awesome. When I decided to lose weight this time, I really wasn't sure, what weight I wanted to get to. My previous goal had always been 185 pounds, but I decided to get on some BMI charts and look at that for my height and my age and, see where I should, what my weight should be. And what I found out was that there's kind of a big range between what a person's weight should be. So after going through the charts and deciding for myself how heavy I thought I wanted to be, I decided that my goal was going to be 165 pounds. And that was kind of in the mid-range, or upper mid-range, of what I found in the charts. When I started the process this time, I was a little over 235 pounds. Actually, the last time I weighed myself, I was 230, or the last time I weighed myself before I started, I was 240 pounds. And then I weighed myself after starting, I think I started on a Tuesday or Wednesday on my program and weighed myself on Mondays, because Monday's my typical weigh day. And on Monday, I was 235 pounds, so I was probably closer to 240 when I started. So that meant I had to lose about 70 pounds, or a little bit more than 70 pounds to get to my goal. And for each person, they have to individually decide, what weight they want to be in order to do the things that they want to do. Because it is so amazing the difference that it makes in what you can do when you're not so substantially overweight. One of the things that I really enjoyed doing growing up was shooting firearms. Now, one of the things I really didn't enjoy growing up was picking up all the brass off the ground, because I grew up around my dad, who's always reloaded our ammunition. I've reloaded ammunition since I was probably 14 or 15 years old. So it's always been a thing to pick up our brass, and when you're substantially overweight, like having this 70-pound backpack of lead on my back, it's really difficult to bend over with that big gut in your way and pick up brass. And sometimes, typically when I'd do it when I was overweight, I'd kneel down on the ground and I'd fill both hands with as much brass as I could before I'd get back up again, because it was so difficult just getting back up, when you're carrying all of that weight around. And it's kind of funny to me now because I just bend over and pick it up. The difference is just so stark But until you lose that kind of weight, you don't really realize it until you really sit down and think about it afterwards. Even though you're doing it so much easier, you really still don't realize it then. But once you sit down and think about it, you really realize how much of a difference it makes being 70 pounds lighter. One of the other places I really noticed the changes in my life was working on our oak trees. There's both properties that I've owned in the last 30 years have had oak trees on them. And the oak trees at our old place in Jacksonville, I'd have to trim them back every year or two just to keep the branches off the roof. And every time a hurricane or tropical storm would come through, if I didn't have them cut up high enough, then you'd end up with the branches beating up the roof of the house. So I'd go out and I'd trim them with a pole saw. And when I'm substantially overweight, and when I'm 60, 70, 80 pounds overweight, I can only work with a pole saw for maybe 10 or 15 minutes. And then not only do I have to take a break, but typically I got to go sit down for a while. But after losing 50, 60, 70 pounds, it's just so amazing the difference. Because I can go out there and I can work with a pole saw, and I typically stay out most of the day until my normal breaks come around, because I just keep going, and I slow down and take breaks every once in a while because the arms still get tired, but it's not like I have to go sit down and catch my breath and get out of the heat like I used to have to do when I was 70 or 80 pounds overweight. It's kind of an interesting thing about heat too. I'm so much more heat tolerant now than I was when I was 70, 80 pounds overweight. I could be out in the heat so much longer now, and it doesn't even seem as hot, for one, and for two, it doesn't seem to bother me anywhere as much. I can get out in the heat and work. On the flip side of that, when it's cold out, I definitely do notice a difference because I don't have that layer of fat around me. But I'd much rather put up, especially living here in Florida, with being able to work in the heat and not having as much difficulty working in the heat, because I'm not carrying around all that extra weight. And yes, I'm looking at some notes, because trying to remember everything I wrote in the whole chapter while I'm walking around out here toting around 70 pounds of lead is kind of entertaining. The next point up is tying my shoes. When I was substantially overweight, there was a time when I was a police officer that I used to have to make sure that I put my shoes on before I put my belt and my gun belt on, because if I did it in reverse order, I wouldn't be able to reach down and tie my shoes, because that beer belly, or not really beer belly because I don't drink, but would be in the way. And just bending over, it's in the way for one, and two, it cuts off all that fat, cuts off your circulation when you're bending over, and sometimes I'd get lightheaded when I'd stand up, which I don't have as an issue anymore. A big turning point this time is after I lost 80 pounds working at the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. I slipped and I got back to gaining weight again. And this time I got up to about, like I said, about 240 before I started this process this time. And I was digging some post holes for a shed that we were putting up, so that we could put our water softener in it and keep it out of the weather. And digging those 4 post holes was really kicking my butt. And it really reminded me of another time I needed to dig some post holes when I lived at the other house. And I was so substantially overweight at the time that I ended up having to have my daughters do it. And that creates what I call inability pain that I'm not willing to put up with anymore. I'd much rather put up with throwing the 70-pound backpack on as a reminder than to put up with the inability of not being able to do the things that I want to do. Another thing that really inspired me this time, when I was digging those holes, is my dad. He was 87 or 86 at the time I was digging them, and watching him walk around the property. Yeah, he's a lot older than me. He's 34 years older than me. But watching him walk around the property, and he has some lung issues, and he's had blood clots in his legs and lungs. So, he's got compromised lungs, and he's got he has a lot of different issues. I'm not going to go into all in detail. But for him to walk around here, he has to stop all the time and catch his breath because he just can't walk that far because he doesn't have the lung capacity. And because, he has heart issues, his heart can't pump enough blood. But he's also 50, 60, maybe 70 pounds overweight, depending on how you look at that BMI chart. So, when I see him moving around, and our family, we've got a lot of aunts and uncles that have lived well into their 80s. And and a lot of them have a tendency to be on the overweight side, actually most of them. And when you see them move around, that makes you really think about, what your life in the future is going to be. And I want to make sure that I can do as many things as I can possibly do for the rest of my life. And if I'm blessed to live long enough to be in my 80s, I don't want to be carrying all that extra weight around that my heart has to pump blood for and that my lungs have to provide oxygen for. And I know, because I've lost all this weight, how much easier it is to do the things that I want to do when I'm not carrying an extra 70 pounds around. And yeah, this backpack with lead isn't exactly like carrying it well distributed about your body, though a lot of mine was around my waist, because that's where I typically carry weight. But it sure is a really good reminder of how much better it feels not to be carrying 70 pounds around. The very first time I lost weight, I probably went from about 220 to maybe 220, 225 down to 185. And I did that through the Body for Life system. And it's a system that I was introduced to from Sergeant Kevin Hensley. And it's a 12-week process. And you eat 5-6 times a day, 6 days a week, and you work out 6 days a week. And the very first time I lost this, a decent amount of weight. I went from, like I say, about 220, 225 down to 185. That was the process I did. And you do it in 12 weeks. And I learned some from that. And then the second time when I lost 80 pounds, I lost about half of it by changing my diet. And then I started walking the Riverwalk. And I'd go out there and walk the Riverwalk while I was at work. I'd park my car in the middle of the Riverwalk and I'd walk part way down to the one end and then part way up to the other end, the parts that were in our zone. And I parked my car in the middle so that I could go back and check reports, and if I needed to get in the car, I wasn't that far away. And at the same time, I was patrolling the Riverwalk, so I was providing a benefit for anybody that was walking down there. And a lot of people really appreciated that. But I'd get down there and, like I said, I lost about half of that 80 pounds. I was probably down 40 or 50 pounds when I started walking. There was a lieutenant that I knew suggested I go down there and walk. And when I first started walking with him, it was really kicking my butt. But I got to where I could walk out there for 12 miles in a shift with 32 pounds of gear on. You do pay a price for that because you do get chafed quite badly, and you typically get a lot of blisters on your feet when you're walking in gear like that, and then stopping by the car every few minutes to, you're cooling off and, checking reports and checking messages and stuff like that. So it definitely beats your body up. But I lost 80 pounds. But when I was looking at losing weight this time, that success worked excellent for me. But when I was looking at losing weight this time, I really I knew I could lose a bit of the weight without working out at all. And initially, I had planned on starting to work out when I got down to about 200, and then, just keep going from there. But when I saw how easy it was to lose weight just by controlling my diet, I just decided to keep going all the way down to 164.6, 9 months after I started. So that was the plan I decided to go with. And, that's what I did. I lost 70.4 pounds in about 9 months without working out and while still eating foods that I love. And when I say eating foods that I love, I eat what I really love on my cheat day, which is Sunday, where I eat pretty much whatever I want within reason. I mean, if you go hog wild and eat everything in sight, you're going to gain weight that day. You're going to gain weight anyway, but it balances out because you eat well throughout the rest of the week by what you lose during the week versus what you gain on your cheat day. But you still have to use some common sense with that, because if you do get off the beaten path, you can end up gaining weight, which I did a few times. And it was always because I went, ate too much, typically on my cheat day. Other days that I have a tendency to gain extra weight is people's birthdays and holidays and stuff like that, because I just use them as an additional cheat day and then get back to my system, which allows me to lose, get my weight back down. One of the things that works really well with my system that I use, what I call deciding for life, is I weigh myself on a daily basis. And most diets that you look at, and even Body for Life, they recommend you only weigh yourself once, and then there are some systems out there that they really don't even recommend you weigh yourself. They want you to, go by measurements and stuff like that, and that may work for some people, but I'm kind of a data-driven kind of person, so numbers, mean a bit to me. So I like to weigh myself every day, and what that allows me to do is if during the week I don't see the weight loss or the maintenance once I've lost my weight that I want, then I can make some small tweaks to make sure that I keep my weight where I want it. And if I only weigh myself once a week, I don't have that opportunity to make those small adjustments. I just have a failure for that week. And failures like that kind of set me back a little bit. So I really like weighing myself at least once a day, and I typically now weigh myself once in the morning and once at night, so I can keep kind of track how much I gain during the day and how much I lose overnight. And it helps me understand a little bit better, the different things that foods do to you, the different things that different minerals and, like sodium and magnesium and potassium do to your body. All of those things, if you have foods with a lot of sodium and magnesium and potassium and calcium in them, you have a tendency to hold more fluid in your body than you would if you didn't have those foods that you ate that day. And there's a happy balance with that, because if I don't have enough sodium in my body, I have a tendency to get nighttime leg cramps. And typically the way I fix those is by drinking a cup of chicken broth, because it's full of sodium, and that's about the only thing that totally cuts out the leg cramps if I get them, when I'm sleeping. And now that I've got things balanced out a little better, it's pretty rare that I actually get the leg cramps. I get some slight ones every once in a while, but I've been really focusing and being very intentional about what I eat and when I eat and how much sodium and magnesium and calcium and stuff like that I get, so that I can reduce the chances of getting those leg cramps. Some of the things that have gotten a lot better for me, and I realized it before when I lost weight to some extent. I see it a lot more now, but my balance is so much better. Before, when I was heavy, just to put my pants on in the morning, I'd typically have to balance against something in order to, put my pants on. Well, after you lose 70 pounds, you're light enough you could just stand there and put your pants on and you're not falling over. Some of the other things that have gotten a lot better are, I talked earlier about picking up brass. I can bend over and pick stuff up now and I don't even think about it. Where I used to have to kneel down most of the time if I had to pick stuff up off the floor because I was so heavy. And if you're heavy, you probably know what I'm talking about. Some of the other things that have improved, I rarely seem to get a cold when I'm this light. I've been to the doctor with my dad and mom, taking them to the doctor when they've been sick. I've been around the hospitals. I've been in the hospital with them several times this year, and I haven't caught anything, even though they've been diagnosed with the flu. I can't say, I'm not a medical professional, that there's any correlation with weight and, getting sick from the flu or not. But I do know, at least for me, I've been around people that are heavier than I am, and they're getting sick and I'm not. So that's just the way I think about it. I'm not a medical professional. I don't know if there's any true correlation to that, but at least for me, it seems to help. One of the other things is, when I do bend over to pick something up, when I'm substantially overweight and I bend over and pick something up, I have to be careful when I stand up, because otherwise I can have a tendency to want to black out. Now, it's not typically the blackout where you hit the ground kind of thing. It's just that where you get really lightheaded and the world starts to spin a little bit. that's something that I haven't had as an issue. You know, either time that I've lost a substantial amount of weight, it's something that goes away. So I can't call it a correlation. I'm not a medical professional, but the reality is for me, it sure seems to make a huge difference. You know, there are some people out there that, you know, have to take little blue pills. And when I'm substantially overweight, you know, I've never taken the little blue pills, but I certainly have had my anatomy not work quite as well as I would like it to. But that's another thing, at least for me, that has gone away both times I've lost a substantial amount of weight, is my plumbing works so much better. You know, I don't have to take any little blue pills. This is a really good reminder of how much better I feel when I'm not carrying 70 pounds of lead around or 70 pounds of fat. Yeah, I know there's more muscle in there than when you're carrying that fat too than what I've got right now. So there is that with me walking around with this backpack that I wouldn't, you know, that I don't have now that I've lost weight. But I am still toting all that extra weight around. And one of the things that I noticed that was kind of interesting with the Garmin app is it actually can pick that information up. As when I walked this path before without the backpack, just to kind of lay it out, that mile I only burned 99 calories. Well, once I threw on my backpack with 70 pounds of lead, I burned 235 calories walking the same path. Yeah, it took me an extra 10 minutes, which if you had 70 pounds of lead on your back, it probably would as well. But it also really reminds me when I watch my dad walk around of how much better I feel. Because I know he's carrying, you know, 60, 70 pounds extra weight around, and he's having to stop all the time. And yeah, I'd kind of like to stop carrying this lead backpack around, but I'm trying to get this video done. And really, I don't want to stop because I'm looking forward to throwing it back on the workbench, getting it off of my back, that is. So I'm going to just keep going and keep this video as short as I can and give you as much information as I possibly can about my book. And my Deciding for Life book, you know, I wrote it with the intent of inspiring people. You know, I had this YouTube channel. If you can't afford to buy a ebook or for about $10 or a paperback book for $20, if you can't afford it and you just want to watch the YouTube videos to hear exactly how I lost weight without working out and while still eating the foods that I love, you could just watch the YouTube channel. You know, because my goal is to truly inspire people to feel how awesome it feels to be 70 or 60 or 70 pounds lighter, 80 pounds lighter. You know, there are a lot of people out there, you look at our world today, that are substantially overweight. And if they could have this feeling, if I could bottle it up and just give somebody the experience of how much better it feels when you're not so heavy, there'd be a lot less overweight people, because this really does feel awesome. And this backpack on my back, it really is a good reminder, because when I do get back to the workshop there and I take it off, I feel so much better and it's instantaneous, unlike losing the weight, which took me 9 months. And you can lose weight faster. The Body for Life system, if you're a person that really enjoys working out, you can probably knock most of it off in 12 weeks, depending on how much you have to lose. But no matter what system you decide to use, if you get lighter, you know, it doesn't necessarily need to be a Deciding for Life system. You know, I'm using this system and talking to people about this system, not because I think it's the only system. I know it's a system that works for me. And if you had a personality like me, it might work for you. But like I said earlier, if you see anything in my videos or in my book that you want to try, make sure you talk to your doctor first. I'm not a medical professional, and if you do some of the things that I do, and you have a health condition that doesn't work with, you may end up harming yourself. And I certainly wouldn't want that to happen. So if you do decide you want to try anything you see in my book or on my YouTube channel, ensure you talk to your doctor first. Because the last thing I want to do is cause anybody any harm out there. I really want to inspire people to feel as awesome as I feel, because the awesomeness is really reminded every time I take this backpack off. And I'm glad I started doing this. I'm going to keep doing it as long as I can, because the reality is it is the best reminder that I can figure out to really know how much better I feel. You know, I used to joke around, and in the book I talked a little bit about, you know, a person could go to Home Depot, I don't recommend it, find something that weighs as much as they want, that they need to lose, pick it up if they're physically able to do so, and walk around with it for a few minutes, because it will truly remind you of kind of what you're going to feel like once you do lose that weight. But I can't recommend that. I'm not a medical professional. It's just an example I'm giving. I never did it for myself. I thought about it. I used to be a construction worker, so when I lost 60 pounds, I equated that to the weight of a bucket of drywall compound, because I used to finish drywall for a living at one time. And you think about how heavy that is, and it is, it's heavy. It's not quite as heavy as the 70 pounds, and I'm not in as physical a shape as when I used to work construction. I quit working construction around 25. I tinker with stuff here and there, personal stuff, but I quit working it at 25. So, this 70-pound backpack feels so heavy especially when I grab it with one hand to throw it on my back. And it is a really good reminder of how much better I feel when I'm not toting that extra 70 pounds around. So hopefully, if you're watching the video or watching one of the shorts, you get inspiration to find a system that works for you. Not necessarily the deciding for life system, because you have to look at your personality and the things you're willing to eat, how much you're willing to work out. Those are all things that you have to take into consideration when you're thinking about losing weight, or at least I did. I don't really love working out, so finding a system that would allow me to lose the weight, without having to work out, without having to schedule workouts, that was important to me. It may not be as important to you. I've worked around people that are huge, that are all muscle bound, but I've worked around some of those people that are specifically huge and muscle bound because they want to eat what they want and not worry about it that much. So they trade off working out, for being able to eat what they want. I'm not the kind of guy that likes to work out that much. And, that really showed when I was a patrol sergeant, because that's really when I put the most of my weight on. I was probably about 225, 230 when I got promoted to sergeant. And I blew up to well over 265 pounds. But as a sergeant, you have more opportunities to eat. You got more people that want to sit down and eat with you. Some supervisors you work for may want to take a break twice a day and sit down and eat. If you work out a lot, that's probably okay for you, maybe. But if you don't like to work out, or don't work out, and you start doing that, it is really easy and quick to put a whole bunch of weight on. The other thing about being a sergeant versus a patrol officer is you're stuck sitting in your car most of the time, or sitting at a desk someplace most of the time, instead of out moving around interacting with people. So all of those things can definitely negatively affect your ability to maintain your weight or lose weight. That's where bringing in the Riverwalk and walking 12 miles and 12 pounds of gear, or I'm sorry, 12 miles and 32 pounds of gear really helped me then. But it beat the heck out of my feet. It chafed me up so much that I'd just be uncomfortable, and I don't have to deal with that as long as I control my weight through my diet. And that's a bit of what I'm talking about. I have tinkered with working out again since I lost my weight, and I will tinker with it some more, because I'm trying to learn as much as I can so that I can pass that information on to more people, so that maybe they can get the inspiration they need to lose a substantial amount of weight. We're almost back here to the workshop where I can take this backpack off. And I'll take that back off, and then we'll do a quick closing and get you all out of here. All right. Glad I don't have to set that all the way down on the ground. I probably wouldn't be able to get back up. It would really remind me of how much better I feel when I'm not. Whew. Boy, that feels so much better. If you've enjoyed the content, please like, subscribe, and click the notification bell. If you think this content can be helpful to a friend, I'm 54 years old. I threw a 70-pound backpack on to go walk around to hopefully inspire somebody out there to lose that 60 or 70 or 80 pounds and feel as awesome as I do. And I hope, if there's somebody out there that this inspires to do so, then let me know, because it helps pick me up as well. But if you know somebody that could use this content, please share it with them, because if they are able to lose a substantial amount of weight, they'll appreciate you for the rest of their lives. Thanks for watching, and may you have an awesome and healthy and yes, lighter day.